I'm going up high to reach the sky. No one can tell me no. I'm gonna.
Hey, and welcome to all of you. It's Dr. Emmanuel, the host of the podcast From Struggles to Success with Dr. Emmanuel. It's such an honor to have all of you listening to this podcast, and thank you for joining. I would also like to acknowledge all of you. Acknowledge you. I'm sure you're asking why I acknowledge you. Well, I acknowledge you for a number of reasons. First, for committing to self-development and learning this art and science of using struggles to become better, stronger, and more successful. Secondly, for sharing the podcast, because I know a lot of you have helped share the podcast and share the word, and it's becoming more and more popular. We are on a mission, and the mission is to get people to be inspired and also to learn the essential skill of using struggles in life to become better and more successful. So thank you for joining us on this mission and for changing lives. That's why we're doing this, purely to change lives. And so before we move into the podcast, I'll ask you to do a few things you can do to help. First, to like the podcast. Second, to share the podcast. And third, to subscribe, because that's what makes it go viral. And we have to make this podcast viral. So I'm Dr. Emmanuel and the host of the podcast. And my day job is as I work as an infectious disease physician. I'm a consultant infectious disease physician in Abu Dhabi. So I look after people who have suspected or confirmed infection, often quite complex infection. But the other thing I do, and part of this podcast, is I am on a mission to teach people to use struggles to become better, stronger, and more successful. And that's the topic of my book, From Struggles to Success with Dr. Emmanuel. Your struggles can make you better, stronger, and more successful. And that's available on Amazon and all other publishing platforms. So please get the book. I'm also doing this podcast as part of the mission. And it's also been very popular. So please also share, like, and subscribe. And there is also an online course which is being developed, will be launched very soon. And there's also public speaking and coaching. So if you need a public speaker or a coach, please do also get in touch. Now, why is this important? Why is the art and science of using struggles to become better, stronger, and more successful? Why is it important? Well, look at your life. I'm sure if you look back at your life, you'll find that you've had struggles in life. And some of them, when used well, have got you to a better place. If you look at the people around you, I'm sure you see the same thing. People around you also use struggles in some ways to become better, stronger, and more successful. And if you also look at successful people in life and speak to them, like I'm going to do today in this podcast, you'll find that they've had struggles in their life and they've also used it positively. It's been a lesson and they've used it also in their favor to become better, stronger, and more successful. And so you should imagine life is like a gym. If you go into a gym, there's different equipment in the gym. And if you lift weight all around, use different equipment, then you build more muscle. Well, life is like that. There's struggles in life, it's part of life. And if you use them in your favor, like in the gym, then you leave the gym stronger. And that's what it's about. So how can you use the struggles in life to become even better? And so in this podcast, we look out for people who are extraordinary people who have this skill of turning struggles into success. And we invite them to come and have a conversation. And then we share the conversation with you so that you learn from them. A wise man learns from their own mistake, and even wiser person learns from other people's mistakes. And so that's the ethos of this podcast. And so today I am really excited, extremely excited to have this conversation with our special guests. Now, Professor John Walley is somebody I've known since 1998. when he supervised my master's in public health dissertation at the University of Leeds. And then after that, I worked with him in the University of Leeds. He's a mentor and my boss at that point, and we had a good time working together. And right from the onset, when I got to know John, I could see that he has that skill of turning major problems into something successful. And so when I started this podcast, it was really clear to me that I needed to get John to this podcast to interview him, so he can share his skill with others. And John is a professor professor of international public health at the University of Leeds. He's done a lot of work in international public health, international health in Africa, Asia, other parts of the world. Worked with multiple organizations around the world, and he's had a fascinating career using with operational health research, and it's really going to be, I think, a fascinating discussion today, and I really, really look forward to this conversation. So, John, you're very welcome, and I wonder whether you want to say a few words and tell us more about yourself.
Yeah, Emmanuel, this is an honor for me. You are one of my success stories, I would say. At least I take some pride in your own success and your work. And of course, as you said, we work very well together after you're doing your Masters of Public Health and doing a lot of work on improving tuberculosis services in Africa. And so about me, I'm a farmer's son from England, UK. I grew up helping out on the farm, looking after the animals, feeding calves, driving tractors. I love that kind of stuff. And but it was a problem because when I was at school, I was a bit of an outsider because all the other kids were town boys and knew things about things like football and stuff. And my dad never knew anything about football and didn't know. I mean, I didn't know the normal things that a child would bring to social life in school. And I was also the youngest. And as I'll talk about in a moment, dyslexic. So I didn't do very well in primary school. I was kept back a year. I couldn't write. I was writing with a pencil and not very well, staring out the window a lot of the time. But the test to go to grammar school was a IQ test. Didn't require me to write. So I passed and got to the top stream of the grammar school, right? Nobody expected me, not even my mum expected me to get through to that. And of course, I was completely out of my depth. I, couldn't read or write properly. And, the teaching style in those days, and I suspect it's similar to what's current in many African and Asian countries, it's kind of teachers just expect you to note everything down and just write down what the teacher says and so on. I mean, just to illustrate how bad it was, my first essay was, I think, frankly, quite rather imaginative, but it was all one sentence. This is the top stream of the grammar school. I started with a capital letter and ended with a full stop. And the rest of the page was just red writing saying, "Pull your socks up, boy," or you'll, kind of. Nobody recognized I got a problem, right? Anyway, I don't know how much you know about dyslexia, but it is very common. It's something like 1 in 10 of people have dyslexia.
Wow.
And it's usually commonly missed, especially in the countries like Africa and Asia, less awareness of it. And it was missed in me, until I was, already graduated. And so typical things is you don't hear very well. There's some auditory processing problem.
Wow.
By the way, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you well. Maybe if you just speak a bit louder, that will make it even better.
A bit louder, okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a processing part, so it affects your understanding of what people are saying, but it's also very much about being able to write well. I mean, one of the things that you typically do is you can't tell your left from the right, and I couldn't tell my left from my right until I left primary school. And the only reason I knew, and if you were to ask me which is my left and right hand, and then I'd say I don't know, and then they'd say, well, which hand do you write with? I say, I don't know.
So this
Unless
one.
I put a pen in my hand and started writing. I'm left-handed. And, I learned to just look down at my knees, and with short trousers, I could see I got a wart on my left knee. So I could tell you which hand I wrote with by looking at my knees. That was fine until I went into long trousers. So anyhow, my point is, I dropped down the stream there. I was the bottom of the class. Got 20% in Latin, French. I was even worse, etc. I didn't start to pick up until I was sort of 13, 14 in my favorite subjects, history and biology, and just I got my first good mark when I was 14. But even then, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what the problem was. And when I did my mock O-levels, GCSEs, that's at 16 years old, I failed all but 2 of them. And then 6 months later, I stood in the queue at school and the teacher read out grade 1, grade 1, grade 1, like this. And I just waltzed out of the room just on a high. And I told my mum, I failed them all. She said, oh, John, well, some people are good with their hands, some people... No, Mum, I passed them all. Grade 1s. What can I do with that? And she said, to her credit, she switched right over very quickly and said, oh, John, well, you can do anything you want. You can be a vet, an engineer, a doctor. I'll be a doctor. But my favorite subject was biology. So there we are. After that, I knew I could do it. And I learnt. And I'm going to ask Emmanuel to put a book into your system so that you can download this book. It's available online.
I will do.
Use Your Head by Tony Buzan. But basically, there's all kinds of tricks you can use to summarize, to enhance your learning by reviewing what you do. And I do this all the time now. When I'm doing my medicine, and you have to learn I'm a doctor, of course. I have to review new things all the time about diabetes, new drugs, new tests, everything. And on my day job at the medical school, I have to review new stuff all the time. And I want to learn something. I have to write it down. I have to review it. That means look at it again afterwards and again a bit later and so on. And that's telling my brain that this is important and you need to remember it and to understand it. So these are tricks which I've learned and then got through my university degree and all these postgraduate courses and exams you have to do. So anyway,
wow, fascinating, John. You
want you to understand and recognize this problem in yourselves, maybe in your children or colleague, and understand where they're coming from and how they may struggle. So, for example, I still can't write very well. I mean, my handwriting is terrible, and it's a scribbly mess on the page. When I was writing medical notes, it was a scribbly mess, and it was no use for me or anyone else. What?
That's a typical doctor's handwriting, some would say.
Well, yes, when you're scribbling something, but I mean, when you write notes in a medical record, you're meant to be readable and understandable for your colleagues. And I struggle with that. I tell you, the time it really changed for me is I was working in Ethiopia. Emmanuel said I'm a public health doctor. That means I'm interested in implementing health programs for common diseases, including the infectious diseases Emmanuel deals with, at a large scale. I mean, at a district, region, country scale. And for example, tuberculosis, but mother and child health, etc. And I was working on those things in Ethiopia. And what changed things for me was a computer. I predate computers. So computer was just fantastic. So if you learn, number one, I'd say learn to touch type. Touch type meaning you keep your fingers in the same position always, and you learn to type it like this. And you don't have to look at your fingers, not this, but this. And I do this all the time. So I think and type at the same time. I don't need to think about my typing. I do it when I'm doing consultations with patients. And do pay attention to the little squiggles underneath that MS Word gives you, the red underneath. I look at that red and think, what's wrong with that word, And I still look at it and think, I don't know what's wrong with it. But maybe, I know I've misspelt it, or I put in, if it's green lines, there's some problem. I missed out a verb or something. So I pay attention to it and change it until it comes right.
Wow.
And now, of course, we've got Grammarly, which is wonderful. I recommend it. It's a free version of Grammarly, spelled with an AR. And it's fantastic. So I put that on my emails, on my Word, everything I do is Grammarly, as well as using the other spell check. My point is, it doesn't look good professionally to have badly spelled, missed out verbs, etc. that happens with dyslexia. So, but even for regular non-dyslexic people, these things are very useful, I think. So, Emmanuel, ask me. I'm talking too much, maybe. Do you want to ask me a few more
you're not.
questions?
It's free flow, and we're listening very attentively, and you've already given us so much to think about, and I am very curious now. I'm very curious, and I'm curious about the fact that
so think
you
about it,
are
1 in 10.
1 in 10 people have dyslexia. And I'm curious about the fact that you are a professor of international public health. You have been successful in getting a large number of grants, I'm aware of. You're also highly published in very high-profile medical journals. And if somebody were to just type your name on PubMed or Google, you find tons of publications. And people would see you would say very successful professor, academic, but they don't know your journey. They don't know what you've gone through to be where you are now. And you are dyslexic, but you've used it actually to become even better. And some people who have the same issue have probably not pursued a career in medicine or academia. So I am really curious to understand what drove you to not to take it as a limitation, but to actually spur you on to success.
The change point was when I got those. I changed from failing all these exams at school to passing them within 6 months. And summarizing, reviewing, that means looking again at what you've written, rewrite it, summarize it, look at it again later. I draw little pictures. I put lots of underlines. You use lots of colorful language and colors and things which will make it look unusual and interesting on the page to help you. Or indeed, if somebody else's book, I'll underline and write in the margin, pencil or whatever. These are all explained in that book I'm telling you about, and hopefully Emmanuel will include. Point is that you can't expect this to happen without effort, and that effort fortunately happened just in time for me,
Right.
and I used it ever since, and I still do so every day. And so, struggles. I've also had lots of big knocks I mean, along the way where I've had problems in my medical career, problems which have knocked me back and think, you know, other people have not been impressed. I've not been impressed with myself. And, obviously there are other skills unrelated to the dyslexia, which are, just being able to pick yourself back up and learn from it and keep going. I don't think I make the same mistake twice, but I have made a lot of mistakes.
That's really important. Not making the same mistake twice, learning.
Yeah, that means a bit of review, thinking, and reflection, which is, again, something you have to learn to do. You think, right, okay, not sure I did the right thing with that patient, or maybe I said something in a bad way in a meeting or with my colleagues or whatever it is, and think about it and how better I can do it next time. Type, but also being willing to go to that person and say, look, I'm sorry, I may have missaid that, and I'm sorry if it was something came over wrongly, but I'm really impressed with what you're doing, and I really want to help, or these kind of things, because those personal skills. By the way, going back to dyslexia, I mean, dyslexia is also a gift, because one of the things about dyslexia is people tend to be imaginative, see the big picture, able to problem solve, and not just accept things as they are. They can see through and look through, and interested to look through and see, okay, how could this be done better? For example, in running health services, so in my world, which is working, my day job is about Africa and Asia health, public health, and that includes clinical things, as Emmanuel knows. I never have accepted how it is good enough, or it could be better.
Could be better.
And, we can rearrange this health center, or the way health centers are being run in Nigeria, in Pakistan, or, wherever it is, to make those services better for the patients, pick up the diseases earlier, put them on treatment earlier, help them to stay on treatment and complete it, and so on. All these things are about just seeing the issues and seeing how better to use your health workers better, the facilities you've got better, and so on. And I'm sure those things would apply to other walks of life as well. So imagination and also problem solving are part of the gifts of dyslexia. And so, as well as learning how to overcome the problems of it, reading, writing, spelling part, but also making the most of the gifts of it.
That's really fascinating way you've put it there, because I say that frequently in my book, From Struggles to Success, that problems are in fact gifts when you know how to use them well. And the example you've just given is a really clear example of how you may be dyslexic, but it actually, you have other gifts with dyslexia, being able to see problems from and solve problems from a sort of a holistic perspective, be seeing the bigger picture, and you certainly demonstrated that in your career with the research you've done on TB, HIV care in Africa and Asia, diabetes, etc., etc. And you seem to also have a natural way of seeing every problem as an opportunity, not as a problem. Is that other people will see it as a problem and get stuck and keep talking about the problem for years, and then you would see it and find an opportunity to use current resources to solve it, or even to get more resources to solve it. And certainly when I was working with you in Leeds, and University of Leeds, that is really what was also fascinating. And I said, when I started the podcast, I knew that I had to get you to this because it was really amazing to see how you always find an opportunity to to find a solution to a major problem. Be it very complex, you seem to always find a way around it. Let's do this. Let's look at this. What about this? And it's also now really coming clear to that actually dyslexia actually gives you that extra skill which other people don't have. But other people may have just seen it as I've got dyslexia and I can't do anything about it, and that's it. And I won't be able to um to do what I want to do in life.
I
But
mean,
you didn't do
most
that,
people wouldn't know. Most people wouldn't know, Emmanuel, that they've got dyslexia. Most
right?
people will have probably been put in there. They're not very bright, and they can't read and write. They're not. Unfortunately, most people are not picked up. So if you can recognize these things or Google it and see what dyslexia means, and think, is this something I've got, or my child has got, or my friend? But the point, I think a lot of these things I've been talking about would apply to anyone really, such as the learning to touch type and to remind your brain, if this is important, you need to know it. You've got to summarize it. You've got to underline it. You've got to review it, look at it again later, and look at it again later, and to tell your brain that this is important, because most of the stuff that goes into your brain just goes straight out again. Because you don't need to know what color car went past. It's a red one, then it's a yellow one. It's not important. But your brain needs to be told that it's important. And then these are some of the ways when you're reading things, when you're listening to a video, you're making notes, or you're, whatever it is in terms of your work and your studies, you need to do these tricks to get your brain to realize, yeah, this is important, and remember it, but also memory and it's about skills as well, because they build up to add to your skill set. Anyway, I'd like to tell you a personal example.
Please, yeah.
So I really messed up badly. When I was working in Ethiopia, before I messed up badly, I was doing very well. I was a public health doctor working on tuberculosis, mother and child health services in northern Ethiopia.
Okay.
This was quite a long time ago, around the time when I learned to touch type, etc. And I helped with my excellent and wonderful Ethiopian colleagues and others. We worked together to develop better services, how to deliver those services, integrate them, and so on. It worked really well.
Okay.
But then I got recruited on the basis of that into the World Health Organization as a consultant in Ethiopia.
Mm-hmm.
I was given two different job descriptions, which is crazy. I was given an HIV job description, which is what I was interested in, and another job description, health strengthening something, which I wasn't interested in at the time. And I went to work on the HIV one and ignored the other. Anyway, I also ignored the fact that they were seeing me as a new consultant. Actually, I felt I've been there for 2.5 years, working in the country. I knew something, etc. And I must have put my feet onto people's toes by not behaving as they're expecting a consultant just flown in from somewhere to behave, right? So I was being too, I don't know. I'm not even sure. But at that time, you have to remember that Ethiopia was being run by a bunch of evil people. It was the time of the Stalinist regime before the change to a democratic regime. The people in power, the Minister of Health, was somebody who machine gunned people in the back of a pickup truck, So anyway, I didn't take into account the nature of one or two people like that. And so I got told, you've got to leave the country tonight.
Immediately.
It was that bad, and I did. I left the country. So I went back to Geneva to WHO. And at that time, unfortunately, I didn't get on very well there either, because not for my mistake, I think in this case, the whole program was being reorganized with a change of director. and I was just sort of sitting there twiddling my thumbs, doing nothing much useful. So anyway, I was sitting in the lovely restaurant there, taking my time, and in walked my old professor. And I said, "Come over here." We talked and so on. I explained I'm not doing much, and he said, "Well, why don't you apply for this job in Vietnam?"
Right.
Which he was the senior consultant to, and I would be the resident one for the Swedish aid there in the Ministry of Health. And that's what I did. I applied, got the job, went there, and I met Sophie Witter there, who is my
your
wife. Their office is just down there. You better. And, the best thing that ever happened to me in my life still is, because I'm a lucky guy.
Wow.
I've got someone I love still. And she's, the best thing that's happened to me in my life, plus my kids that are kids. So you're just taking those opportunities after what has been, frankly, a very difficult period in my life, turned into one of the best things in my life, if not the best thing in my life. So I don't know where that is in lessons, but, make the most of your opportunities when they arise, even if you've had a few knocks before.
Wow. What seemed like a struggle turns out to be actually a opportunity and success. So sometimes in life, the worst things that you think are happening to you may in fact be leading you towards the path of even better or the best things in life, just like you going to Vietnam and meeting your better half, Sophie.
So,
amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So it's, by the way, the modern equivalent of some of these tools are there because of IT, because of computers, because of the spell checkers, the Grammarly that I was telling you about. But now, of course, there's ChatGPT and things like that as well. So you also have to be careful when you're using these things, especially ChatGPT, because it can be wrong. So you have to read back over and check and say, well, have they made a device in changing the words in your spell checker, or in ChatGPT, have they written some nonsense in there or something inappropriate, or they've put references in there that are not true, etc. So I'm just saying you have to be, even though you make the best of technology, you do have to be very careful that you make the best of it and check it.
So lots of things that people can use to help themselves, and they are. I don't know if you've heard about a tool called Speechify. Also, it's called Speechify.
No, I haven't.
And it's actually developed by a young, really inspiring, intelligent young man called Cliff Weitzman. He's based in the US, and he's got dyslexia. And he struggled in school, and then discovered he was dyslexic. And because he had difficulties reading, was actually getting people to read to him, like his father reading books to him, his mother also reading his books to him. And when they do read to him, he actually does very well in school, rather than having to sit down and write and read on his own. But he later on developed Speechify, which automatically converts any text into an audible audiobook at a click of a button. So really useful tool as well for people who may be dyslexic. Again, he's a fascinating example of how he's used dyslexia in his favor, because he has other skills, other skills that he's developed that are fascinating. For example, he can read, he can listen to a podcast, a 1 hour podcast, in less than 30 minutes, because he reads it, he puts it on fast. And so even though it's fast, he picks it up very quickly, because he's developed that sense and that skill that other people don't have. So we'll have to spend 1 hour listening to a podcast. He will listen to the podcast in less than 30 minutes and remember it and retain everything.
let's assume our readers, people watching this video, try using it. I would recommend, as well as when you're reading normally, making notes as you go along. And you can make notes in a sort of best way that suits you, whether it's if you're reading, you're underlining in soft pencil and writing little pictures in or words, keywords, very important in understanding what you're reading. Underlining them, making a little note here and there, anything, especially if you use evocative kind of words, colourful, rude even, any kind of way of making it stand out and making your brain sort of sit up and go, whoa, hold on, I'm going to remember this, and gets laid down in your brain in permanent memory instead of just going and out the other side. So whichever you do, if you are listening to an audio one, which is a great idea, I agree, but nevertheless, write it down. Make keyword notes. By keywords,
Fascinating,
I was saying a
because
sentence about
I
writing
guess
things
that's
down,
something.
I'd underline right.
That's right. I guess that's something that is useful as a skill and something we should be doing anyway. But you do it more and better because you've had to do it in order to sort of to overcome this dyslexia, and now you use it in your favor, and other people may not develop that, may not use it.
And I still do. I still do. Because nowadays, you don't stay in the same job the whole life. You don't, even if you are in the same job, as you know, Emmanuel, we're learning new things all the time, and information is coming at us all the time. We have to recognize and understand what is quality information, evidence-based, etc., but also then to pay attention to it and use the kind of things I'm talking about, underlining keywords, whatever it is, reviewing it, etc., just to make sure that your brain knows and remembers it and so on. Because I'm sure everyone has experienced reading through a book and thinking, oh, that was great. And then thinking, well, what? I can't remember anything in it. Which is okay if it's a novel, but if it's your work thing, it's another matter.
It's another matter.
Anyways, yeah. So, but I'll just mention again that reflection thing, because another key thing is if you do make mistakes, and believe me, people do. I have made many. That willingness to reflect on it, sit there and think, okay, from that experience, what did I do? What was it? Why did that person misinterpret what I said? Or why has that person come over negative to me? Or, I realized I said something inappropriate somehow, and what was it? And so on. Or just a work experience, and you reflect on it. Because that is a lifetime learning thing. And then go and read it up. As you know, Emmanuel, you've had a consultation, you see the patient, you think, I don't know if I know enough about this. And you make a note and read it up that evening. There's lots of information and sources out there on the web nowadays, but we have to reflect a bit and recognize our knowledge gaps, or where we've not quite got it right, to go and check it over, read it over, and reflect on it. So
that's a life skill.
I'm sure you do that.
That's a life skill. Continuous reflection from experience, and also for knowledge. For knowledge, without reflection, you don't really learn. And it looks like you've also, that's really, I think, an important lesson for those that are listening, to continuously develop that skill of reflection and learning. And that's how you learn from struggles as well, because if you can have a lot of struggles, but it's like they're like bosses. They pass and you just don't learn from them, make the same mistake, don't develop. But if you do continuously reflect, continuously learn from them, then you become better each time. You become better, stronger, more successful. And going back to the analogy of the gym, you're using it like a gym to build. Yeah, lifting the weight.
Not that I ever go in a gym. I suspect you do, Emmanuel.
Absolutely.
When the sun
Fascinating.
clears and the rain stops, I go outside and run around or walk up the hill or whatever. I spend too much time indoors. But I think if you're living in Abu Dhabi, Emmanuel, I can imagine it's too hot to do that. No.
Not always. It now coming it's just winter, end of winter, so it's actually quite nice
Ah,
here. It will be getting into summer soon, but not yet. So still lovely weather and very
well,
nice to be outside.
well, I would rather be in Africa or Southeast Asia. I love being in those places. People have a
And
big smile like yours, Emmanuel, and people friendly, lovely, and the nature, the weather, the all that stuff. People think, maybe some of your viewers think, oh, well, I can see all this wonderful stuff that people have got when they work in USA or Europe or whatever. What they don't realize is that what really matters for human happiness is the community around you, your family, your friends, you know, the things you have at home where you are. I mean, I think Emmanuel, life, if you've got a reasonable salary, I know that helps. Um, in many of these countries where I've lived in so many African and Asian countries and still am working in those places, and I know I prefer being there than where I am here. Um, but that said, even here, of course, I appreciate that community and family stuff. So, just for those of you, it's a completely different issue, but do remember life isn't better over there, even though they earn more money. It's that family and community, that well-being that you get from people that you know and say hello to, and people you care about and they care about you. That sort of stuff is what makes us happy.
thank you,
Sorry,
John.
I've gone off track a little bit.
Such a profound message, and for two reasons. First, I've always felt that your in the conversations we had and work we've done together, that your heart is in Africa and Asia, because you still talk you how passionate you are about Africa and Asia is the first thing I think to say. And then secondly, about relationships, because you have always been able to maintain close relationships and maintain relationships with people that you have met as friends and colleagues throughout the world. And likewise, as I said, when I started this podcast, I knew that I had to reach out to you to be part of this podcast, because I'd learned so much from you, and I knew there was so much that you could also share with other people. And I'll tell a story. Maybe some of you remember what the University of Leeds. You
Go on.
you also learn so much from Africa in terms of relationships and greetings, that you were also very fond of greeting people as you greet in Africa with a big hug. And so I remember when you were in University of Leeds, when you used to come back from a trip to Africa, and I think forget that you're no longer in Africa, and giving everybody a hug when you meet them in the University of Leeds, and people standing back.
Yes, yes,
I'm wondering what's going on. This is UK. We keep our distance.
yeah,
No,
yeah. Well, you have to be a bit cautious sometimes with people from the opposite sex. Of course, if you don't know them that well, you can't just go and give them a hug, maybe until they know who you are and they want that kind of thing. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, what a precious thing,
yeah,
and just that smile and that greeting that you get
warmth.
um, from people you may know a bit or more, and it just makes you feel happy.
Absolutely.
Um, so, so that's
Great.
why.
So John, we're coming to the. I'm rounding up the podcast, and now, we have a tradition on the podcast of
Oh,
asking the special guests what to share a key lesson. So, if you are faced with a major struggle in life, professionally, personally, etc., what is one thing you would say you should do? What is one thing you should not do? One do and one don't. What are your thoughts?
well, I'll start with the don't. Don't give up, or don't accept that label of not being very bright, or that your child's not very bright, or your friend, or whatever. So, people have different skills and as well as problems, and we should learn to make the most of what people bring. Such as that guy you were describing that was the Speechify. He had problems, and he made the most of his skills as well as helping others to overcome his problem. And I can recognize that. I feel for that. So lessons. People judge you too much by something like not being able to write properly. And you need to make an effort to do that. And that requires things like spell checker, the Grammarly, the other things which will help you do that. And for example, that book I mentioned, reviewing what you're reading so that you remember it, etc. And of course, things like people's names. I mean, I have to do the same for people's names because I don't remember people's names. I always remember people's faces and so on. But, you have to somehow use these review and write things down sort of ways to remember people's names, etc. So all of these tricks that you can learn and on any problem you have, reflect upon it, think, yep, I could do better than that. I can do this, that, and overcome it.
Wow,
it's a long
inspiring
journey. It's still the case. I'm not young, and it's still happening. It's still something I'm using every day before this call. So
fascinating.
Hey,
thank you, John. It's been really a wonderful conversation. We've learned not only about turning struggles into success, but about an important condition, dyslexia, what it is, how to recognize it, and also strategies to actually use dyslexia in your favor to become better, stronger, more successful, just like you have. And it's an honor and a pleasure to have had you on this podcast, sharing your life lessons. And I'm sure a lot of people are going to benefit from it. And that's what this podcast is about. It's about changing lives, transforming lives. And you certainly, I think, have done that as part of this podcast and the conversation we've just had. I wonder whether you wanted to say something to close before I close the podcast, John.
Make the most of yourself, because you're a very special resource. And I'm not talking to you, Emmanuel, because I know you have. So I wish everyone who listens to this can, use it to their favor and to help others.
Thank you. Thank you, John. It's such an honor again. And if we were in Africa, we could call you different names. It would be Papa John or Uncle John. But for Professor John Walley, really a pleasure and honor. And thank you for joining this podcast and sharing your wisdom. What you can see as a wise person sitting down, other people can't see from the top of a tree. And that's an African saying. So it's really a pleasure and honor to having had you on this podcast. For all our listeners, thank you for joining. And we'll put all the details about dyslexia and the resources in the description for you to be able to access. And thank you for joining the podcast, for sharing, liking, and also subscribing. We are starting a movement. We're on a mission. And so please help us to do that and get to as many subscribers, followers as possible, and let's change lives. So we look forward to seeing you on the next episode of the podcast. Thank you again, Professor John Walley.
My pleasure.